There is a particular way a room goes quiet when powerful men are deciding whether to send you back. And I had heard it twice before, so I knew it the third time, in the great hall of the Iron Reach, with the lord who had once discarded me standing across the floor demanding that the law give me back to him. He had the custom on his side, or near enough. Everyone in that hall knew the story. By then, the twice-returned Omega, deemed useless by 2 packs, plucked out of the placing hall by the Alpha King himself, and now Lord Voss stood before the throne with his fine legal language, arguing that a king could not simply overturn the placing, that I was placed goods, indentured property, returned once already to him as defective, and that the law of the realm entitled him to reclaim what he had lawfully held. He was not wrong about the law. That was the horror of it. The whole cruel machine that had traded me twice was built into the law, and the law does not care that a woman is standing in front of it with a heart. I had spent my life being handed back, and I had a choice in that hall that I had never been given before, to stand quiet and let the powerful decide my worth a third time, the way I always had, or to open my mouth and say the thing that could either free every placed Omega in the realm or get me sent back to the man who had returned me. 2 packs had taught me to stay quiet. I was about to find out whether the third time would teach me something else. But I am ahead of myself. Let me start where it started, which is at the bottom, in the placing hall, on the day I had stopped believing I was worth keeping. 2 packs, 2 returns. I had started to believe the problem was me. Then he walked in. My name was Marrett, and by the time I was placed a third time, I had a number I answered to more readily than my name. I was an Omega, the lowest the packs keep, and I was packless, which is worse. A wolf with no pack has no protection, no standing, no place, and the realm has a custom for such creatures, an old and lawful and thoroughly barbaric custom called the placing. A packless Omega is not free. She is placed, indentured, sold on a term of years to whatever pack will take her, traded through the placing halls like a sack of grain, to labor where she is sent and belong to whoever holds her tag. It is not, I must be clear, the other thing you may be imagining. The placing is a custom of servitude and labor, not of the body, and I say so only because the distinction mattered enormously to me, and mattered not at all to the men who bought me, who regarded an indentured Omega as a tool that happened to breathe. I wore a tag, a little iron disc with a number stamped on it, hung at my throat, the mark of placed goods. I had worn it since I was 16, and I had been returned twice. The first pack placed me at 17 and sent me back within the year. The second placed me at 19 and kept me longer and sent me back harder. Both, when they returned me to the placing hall, gave the same reason. Stamped onto my tag, beside my number in the shorthand, the halls use: unsuitable, defective goods, useless. I want to tell you what useless meant, because it took me years and a king to understand it, and I believed the lie for most of that time. When you are told twice, by 2 separate packs in the cold language of commerce, that you are defective, that you were tried and found wanting and sent back, you do not, after the second time, blame the packs. You blame yourself. You lie awake with your number cold against your throat, and you catalogue your defects, and you decide that there must be something truly wrong with you. Some rot the packs could see that you cannot, because 2 of them looked at you and said, "Take her back, she is no good." By the time I was placed a third time at 21, I had stopped hoping to be kept. I had started hoping only to be placed somewhere that would not be cruel about returning me, because I no longer believed there was a version of me anyone would want to keep. The problem, I was certain, was me. I did not know, standing on the block in the placing hall for the third time in my life, that the reason I kept being returned was the one thing about me that was worth anything at all. The Alpha King was not supposed to be there. Kings do not attend placings. A king has no need to buy an indentured Omega. So, when the great doors of the hall opened and the room stood and the whisper went round that the Alpha King himself had come, no one understood it, least of all me, standing on the block with my tag at my throat and my 2 returns stamped beside my number, waiting to be sold to whichever pack wanted cheap labor and would not mind that I was defective goods. His name was Greywood, and he had come, I would learn, for a reason that had nothing to do with buying. He had come to see the placing with his own eyes, because he had been building, quietly and for years, toward abolishing it. A king who found the whole custom barbaric and meant to end it, and who had come to the hall to witness the thing he intended to destroy, so that no one could ever tell him he did not understand what he was ending. He had not come to buy an Omega. He had come to bury a custom. And then the auctioneer began to present me and read out my defects for the buyers, my 2 returns, my unsuitability, the shorthand of a woman twice found wanting, and something in me, some last unbroken thing, could not stand there and be catalogued as spoiled goods one more time in silence. I was certain I was useless, but I was tired. And I was 21, and I had a spine that 2 packs had failed to break, however hard they tried. And when the auctioneer called me defective for the 3rd time in my life, I lifted my head, and I said to the whole hall, in a clear voice, I did not know I still had, I am not defective. I am difficult. There is a difference, and the fact that you cannot tell it is not a flaw. In me, the hall went silent. An indentured Omega does not speak on the block, and the Alpha King of the Iron Reach, who had come to watch a custom die, looked up at the twice-returned Omega who had just corrected her own auctioneer, and something happened in his face, and before the bidding could begin, before a single pack could offer a single coin for the defective goods, he said 2 words that ended it. She stays. I did not understand him. No one did. The hall erupted in confusion, and I stood on the block certain there had been some mistake, and the auctioneer stammered that the Omega was placed goods, twice returned unsuitable, that surely the king did not want defective. She stays, the king said again, and this time there was iron in it, and the whole hall heard a king's will close around 2 words. I am ending the bidding. This one does not go to any pack in this room. She comes with me. And he came up to the block himself, the Alpha King, and he looked at the tag at my throat with an expression I could not read, and he did not touch it, which I noticed, because everyone touched the tag. The tag was the handle they used to move me, and he said, quietly, only to me, you said you are difficult, not defective. I heard you. I have been looking for the difference my whole reign and no one in this room. But you could name it. You are not going back. Not to them, not to the hall, not ever. I want to tell you, I felt saved. I did not. I felt terrified. And I felt certain with the bone-deep certainty of a woman returned twice that this was simply a longer road to the same ending. That the king would take me and discover my defects as the others had, and send me back a 3rd time, and that the higher he raised me, the further I would fall when he inevitably found whatever the others had found. Because that is what being returned twice does to you. It does not merely take your place. It takes your ability to believe you could ever have one. The king had said, she stays. I heard it as a sentence with a delay in it. I had no framework left for a keeping that would last. If you have ever been told, twice, by people with power over you, that you are worthless, and then had someone insist otherwise and found that you could not believe them, that the wound had grown over the place where believing used to live. Then you know the strange, guarded, frightened thing I carried into the palace of the Iron Reach, and you know it is not a thing anyone can simply talk you out of. I am going to tell you why 2 packs truly sent me back, and what Lord Voss did when the Omega he had discarded turned up on the arm of a king, and what it costs a woman who has been returned twice to let herself be kept. Stay with me to the Great Hall and the reclaiming. The defect that got me sent back twice turned out to be the only thing about me worth a crown, but I was the last person in the realm to believe it. The king took me to his palace, and then the Alpha King of the Iron Reach, who could command armies with a word, discovered that he had absolutely no idea how to convince one twice-returned Omega that she was worth keeping. It would have been funny if it had not been so tender. Greywood was a decisive man. You saw it in the hall, 2 words and a custom stopped. But decisiveness is useless against a wound like mine, and he knew it was there, and he set about trying to heal it the only way a powerful man knows how, which is to prove a thing by force of effort. He was, I came to understand, a king who tried. When he wanted a thing done, he brought the whole weight of himself to it, and now he wanted me to know I was not defective, and so he tried to prove it to me, at length and with the emotional precision of a battering ram. He gave me proofs of worth. He had my quarters appointed like a lady's, as though fine rooms could argue me out of a lifetime of being spoiled goods. He arranged for me to be shown honours, deferences, the visible marks of value, missing entirely that a woman who has been valued and then returned trusts visible marks of value least of all, because she has watched them be taken back. He would come to me and list my merits gravely, like a man reading a favourable inventory. You are quick, you are brave, you saw the difference between difficult and defective when no one else could, as though if he catalogued my worth thoroughly enough, I would be forced to accept the sum. And every time I would thank him and not believe a word, because the last 2 packs had made list 2 at the start, before the lists turned into unsuitable. "You do not believe me," he said one night, frustrated, a king unused to failing at a thing he had set his will to. "You are trying to prove I am worth keeping," I said. Both of them tried to prove it too at first. Then they proved the opposite. I have learned not to trust the proving, my king. The proving is just the part that comes before the returning. I looked at him, and I said the truest and hardest thing I knew. "You cannot argue me out of this. There is no proof you can show me that the last 2 men did not show me first. The only thing that would convince me is a thing you cannot give me in a night or a gesture or a list of my merits. It is time. It is staying. It is being here still, when you have had every chance to send me back and every reason 2 other packs found sufficient. That is the only proof I have never been given, because no one has ever kept me long enough to give it." And the king, the trying king, who had been trying so hard and so wrongly, went quiet. I watched him understand, at last, that he had been fighting my wound with the very weapons that made it, and that the one thing I needed was the one thing that could not be performed, only proven slowly. "Then I will stay," he said, "and I will stop trying to prove it, and simply do it, for as long as it takes you to believe I am not going anywhere, however long that is." He almost smiled. "I am told I am not a patient man. I find I am willing to learn." For this, that was the night I began. Against every instinct, 2 packs had beaten into me, to hope. Which was, of course, exactly when Lord Voss arrived, to take it all away. Lord Voss was the 2nd pack. He was the one who had kept me longest and returned me hardest. and I had not spoken his name in this telling until now, because I could barely stand to, and because I did not know, until he walked into the king's court, that he was so much more than the man who had discarded me. Lord Voss was the placing. Not all of it, but the heart of it. The greatest holder of indenture rights in the realm, the man who had grown vast and rich on the trade in packless omegas, who controlled placing halls across 3 territories and profited from every number-stamped tag in the kingdom. When he had bought me and found he could not break me to docile use, he had returned me as defective. Yes, but I had been one small transaction in an empire of them, and I had never understood, wearing my tag, that the man who threw me back was one of the most powerful lords in the Iron Reach, and King Greywood meant to abolish the whole of it. Which meant that when the king plucked a twice-returned omega off the block and swore she would never be placed again, and then began moving in earnest to end the placing altogether, Lord Voss understood that his entire empire, his wealth, his power, the barbaric custom he had built his house upon, and that the spark of it was a defective omega he had personally discarded, now standing at the king's side, proving simply by being valued that the whole lie the trade rested on. If a twice-returned, unsuitable, useless omega could be a king's chosen, then the placing had never been sorting the worthy from the worthless at all. It had only ever been men calling women worthless to make owning them feel just, and I was the living proof that undid it. So Lord Voss moved to reclaim me, and he moved with the law because the law was his. He came to the king's own court and invoked the custom against the crown, and it was the cleverest and cruelest thing because it was legal. By the law of the placing, an omega returned, as defective remained bound to the holder who returned her until her indenture term expired. I had never been freed, only sent back, and my term still ran, and it ran to Voss. He stood before the throne and argued that the king had taken placed goods that lawfully belonged to Lord Voss's house, that a king is bound by his own realm's law, and that the twice-returned omega must be restored to the holder of her indenture. He did not want me, he wanted the principle, because if the king could simply take a placed omega and keep her against the law, then the placing had no law behind it, and if the placing had no law behind it, he was not fighting for me, he was fighting for the right to have thrown me away. That is the great hall. The cold open promised you. Lord Voss, with the law on his side, demanding the crown return his defective goods, and half the Court of Lords quietly with him, because half the Court of Lords profited from the placing too, and the king unable to simply override the law without unmaking the very legitimacy he ruled by. Greywood would have done it, I saw it in his face, that he would have defied the whole law and the whole court and kept me by force, and I understood, watching him, that if he did, he would win me and lose the thing that let him free everyone else. Because a king who breaks his own law to keep one woman is a king who has proven the law can be broken by whoever holds the throne, and that is a different tyranny wearing a kinder face. So I did the thing 2 packs had spent years teaching me never to do. I stopped waiting for the powerful to decide my worth. I spoke. He is right about the law, I said, and the hall turned, because an omega does not speak in a king's court any more than she speaks on the block, and the wrongness of it bought me the silence I needed. Lord Voss holds my indenture. By the law of the placing, I am his to reclaim, and the king cannot simply take me without unmaking the law he rules by. He is entirely right. I looked at Voss, the man who had discarded me, straight on, the way I had never once been allowed to look at him when I wore his tag. So do not let the king break the law for me. Change it. Here now, in front of all of them. Because the law Lord Voss is standing on is the law that let two packs try to break a woman and stamp her useless when she would not break, and I am not the only one. There are thousands of us wearing numbers, sent back and sent back, told we are defective by men who only mean that we would not become things. Lord Voss does not want me returned because he wants me. He wants me returned because if a twice useless Omega can stand in a king's court and be worth listening to, then every tag in this realm is a lie, and his whole fortune is built on that lie. I turned to the assembled lords, the ones quietly with Voss, and I said the thing I had spent 5 years being too broken to say. You called us defective to make it bearable to own us, but the defect was never in us. It was in a custom that calls a woman useless for refusing to be used. I was returned twice for having a spine. I would be returned 100 times more. And I am done being ashamed of the one thing about me that two packs could not take. The hall did not breathe, and Lord Voss, who had built an empire on the silence of placed women, made the mistake such men always make when the silence finally breaks. He reached for force because his law was collapsing in front of him. He had brought men, as great lords do, and when he saw the court turning, he moved to take me from that hall by the old right, physically, the way his kind had always moved placed Omegas, and his man came for me with a hand already reaching for my tag, and I did not flinch this time because I was done being moved by the tag at my throat. The king's second, Sigurd, already there, and the king himself was already moving, and Voss's man fought it of me, drew instead. The blade meant to cowl. The court opened my arm as I stepped back, a bright cold line and a wash of heat over the iron tag that had marked me as goods since I was 16. But it was the last time anyone would ever reach for that tag, because a placed Omega, bleeding in a king's court for the crime of naming the truth, is a thing that cannot be unseen, and the hall that had half-sided with Voss turned against him all at once, and the king was between us, and it was over. It shook the realm, and the shaking freed thousands. Greywood did not abolish the placing by breaking the law. He abolished it by remaking it. There in that hall, with a bleeding Omega's testimony ringing in every ear, and a great lord's violence fresh on the floor, because it is one thing for a king to call a custom barbaric, and another for the whole court to watch the custom draw a blade on a woman. Lord Voss was undone, his indenture empire unspooled, his tag struck from the law, and every placed Omega in 3 territories had her term dissolved and her tag made worthless in a single season. It was the largest freeing the Iron Reach had ever seen, and it began with a woman who had been returned twice and had finally stopped believing the return was her fault. The realm learned that the thing it had called worthless, it had only called worthless to justify the owning, and that the difference between difficult and defective is the difference a free people are obliged to learn. It made the powerful ashamed of their tags. It should have. My arm healed slow and left a long scar, and I find I do not mind it. It is the second best thing I ever earned. The best was learning that I had never been defective at all. I kept the tag. Greywood wanted it thrown into the forge with all the others. There was a great burning of them that season. Thousands of iron numbers melted down, and it is a sound I will hear on my best days for the rest of my life. But I kept mine, my 1 iron disc with my number and my 2 returns stamped into it, and it hangs now, not at my throat, but on the wall of the Luna's chambers, where I can look at it and remember the woman who wore it and believed the lie, and how close she came to never finding out it was a lie. It is a year now, as I set this down. And I am Luna of the Iron Reach, which the court has stopped choking on, and the freed Omegas have not stopped celebrating, and which I still cannot quite write without the twice-returned girl in me flinching, waiting for it to be taken back. But it is not taken back. That is the whole of what Greywood gave me, and it is the only gift I have ever fully believed, because he gave it the one way it could be given, which was slowly, by staying. He stopped trying to prove my worth in grand gestures the day I told him the proving was the part that comes before the returning, and he simply stayed. Instead was here in the morning, and the next morning, and the next, through every test the return part of me devised to catch him leaving, until one ordinary day I woke and realized I had stopped waiting for him to send me back, and that the waiting had been so constant for so long that its absence was the first peace I had ever known. He did not argue me out of my wound. He outlasted it. It is the most patient thing an impatient man has ever done, and he did it for me. The defective goods, the twice returned, the useless omega no pack would keep. He came to find me just now, where I was writing this by the fire, and read over my shoulder the way he is not supposed to, and always does, and asked what I was setting down. I told him I was writing the story of the day he walked into the placing hall and said, "She stays." He was quiet a moment, in the way that used to read as a king's decisiveness, and that I now know is a man who tried too hard for too long choosing a true word over an easy one. He touched the scar on my arm, the way he does. "You write it as a rescue," he said. "The king who plucked the useless omega off the block, who said 2 words and stopped a custom, and I did say them. But I will tell you what actually happened in that hall, because you have never once written it true." He turned my hand over. "I did not save you, Marit. I came to that hall to bury a barbaric custom, and I was full of righteous certainty about the worthlessness of what it did. And then a twice-returned omega, whom the whole room, including herself, had agreed was defective, stood on the block and corrected her own auctioneer, named the exact difference I had spent my reign unable to name, and taught the king of the Iron Reach in one sentence the thing his whole abolition had been missing, that the custom was not wrong because it wasted the worthless. It was wrong because it manufactured the worthless. It called women defective to make owning them bearable. And the proof was standing on the block being called defective while she was the most valuable person in the room. You did not need me to rescue you. You needed me to get out of the way of the truth you were already telling. So do not write that I saved the useless omega. Write that the useless omega walked into a king's abolition and gave it the one thing it lacked, which was her, and that the day I said she stays, I was not granting you worth. I was recognizing it, a beat behind the whole room, the way the powerful always are. He almost smiled. You were never defective, Marit. You were the correction. It only took the realm 3 sails to hear you. So I will leave you with the question I still turn over, and I would truly love to know what you think. Greywood swears I was never the one being rescued, that I walked in already telling the truth, and he only got out of its way. But I have wondered on the long nights whether that is true, or whether it is a kind thing a king says to a woman who was returned twice. Because the fact remains that 2 packs sent me back, and I believed them, and it took a king saying she stays before I could begin to disbelieve the lie. So, which is true? Was my worth always mine, waiting only to be recognized, or does a person who has been called worthless enough times genuinely need someone with power to say otherwise before she can find it again? Did I free myself in that hall, or did it take a king's 2 words to unlock the voice 2 packs had shut? Tell me your verdict below. I read every one, and so he has confessed. Does the king? And if you want to stay in the Iron Reach with us a while longer, comment asterisk, 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 and I will tell you next what happened when the thousands of freed Omegas, their tags melted down, began arriving at our gates. Not to be placed, for there is no more placing, but to be asked for the first time in their lives a question no one had ever asked them, what do you want? So if you have been sent back, wherever you are listening from tonight, returned, discarded, told by someone with power over you that you are defective goods, hear this from a woman who wore the tag and believed it. The defect was never in you. It was in the ones who called you useless because you would not become a thing. You are not difficult to keep. You are only difficult to own, and those are not the same. And anyone who cannot tell the difference was never worthy of keeping you. Tupac sent me back the third time someone finally said she stays. May yours say it soon. And may you, unlike me, believe it the first time.